Dr. Atmanand's experience in teaching, research, and consultancy is of more than 34 years. He is one of the longest serving deans of India. He has taken many new initiatives like the launch of the MDI School of Energy Management, Journal of IMT Ghaziabad, and established MDIM, to name a few. He has contributed to various national responsibilities as member of the State Finance Commission, Government of Bihar, Planning Commission, Government of India, and as member of Ad hoc Task Force, Cabinet Secretariat, Government of India, member of Review Committee, Ministry of Ayush, Government of India, member of Advisory Committee, Ministry of Power, Government of India. Dr. Atmanand has authored 16 books and published more than 100 research papers in refereed national and international journals. He has undertaken several consulting assignments in the area of energy, insurance, infrastructure, project, social development, leadership, etc. He specializes in public enterprise management, management of energy and environment, power, oil and gas, steel, financing infrastructure, infrastructure projects, project finance, economic and business environment, public policy and management. His contribution of many years has been recognized in the form of awards like Rashtriya Gaurav Award for his excellence and contribution in the nation building, Indian Achievers Award for Corporate Leadership 2010, Economic Development Award for Excellence in Higher Education 2011, Exemplary Global Leadership Award 2010, and appreciation letters from various departments like the Ministry of Power, Government of India, and CEL. Professor Dr. Atmanand's vision is to have people around him who are thinkers and doers in one person. He spreads the policy of connect, nurture, and grow. So with this introduction, I request our director sir to say a few words on this occasion. Over to you, sir.
Yeah, good evening. Thank you very much, Professor Souvik, for your kind words. Dear participants and colleagues, good evening and warm welcome to you all. I am pleased to welcome you all to this e-workshop on the topic Digital Access Brokers, Tools to Explore Open Access Resources. I take this privilege to welcome our guest for today's workshop, Professor Parthasarathy Mukhopadhyay, who is an expert in library and information science and former head, Department of Library and Information Science, Kalyani University. MDIM's vision is to be internationally excellent business school, known for our academic ambition and influence in building a responsible future for both business and society globally. We are highly focused to create an ethical and knowledge-centric culture that values outstanding academic excellence, training, research, and consultancy. In this progression, I'm delighted to share that MDIM Business Review, the Journal of MDIM, has been registered and assigned with the ISSN number on 3rd February 2021. And the inaugural issue was published in the MDIM website. I would like to congratulate our team, MDIM Business Review, for this success and milestone. I also appreciate Professor Souvik Banerjee, editor, MDIM Business Review, and Mr. Jogen Sharma for making this workshop happen during this pandemic time. Like you all, I am also eagerly waiting for the experts' view on today's topic. Welcome, Professor Parthasarathy. Thank you all.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your kind words. Now I will take this opportunity to introduce our resource person for this today's evening workshop, is Professor Parthasarathy Mukhopadhyay. Professor Parthasarathy Mukhopadhyay is a renowned person in the world of library science and is a long-term well-wisher of MDI Murshidabad. Professor Mukhopadhyay is a professor of library and information science and former head Department of Library and Information Science, Kalyani University. He is a recipient of Best Young LIS Teacher Award. He is an open source enthusiast and worked as a developer and promoter of many open source projects. He has more than 100 papers in journals and conference volumes and 5 books. His recent book on interoperability and retrieval is published by UNESCO, Paris. Professor Mukhopadhyay acted as a metadata consultant for the project NDL, that is National Digital Library, hosted by IIT Kharagpur. He is presently a member of the advisory committee for National Virtual Library Project of the Ministry of Culture, Government of India. He developed Vidya Online, an e-learning portal for Vidyasagar University in 2006, and presently runs 3 online courses in SWAM platform. So with these words, I hand it over to Professor Mukhopadhyay for his session. And also, I will request all the participants, if you have any question, you can kindly put those questions in the chat box, and our resource person will address them if time permits after the workshop. So with these words, I hand it over to our resource person, Professor Mukhopadhyay. Over to you, sir.
So thank you, Director Sir, and thank you, Professor Banerjee. I do hope that I am audible to all of you, and I cordially, welcome all the e-persons present here in this virtual workshop. So during the presentation, I will keep my video feed off because this rainy season, the bandwidth is a problem. And again, after presentation is over, I will on my video feed and try to answer some of your questions. So is this planning okay with you?
Yeah, it's okay. I think this audience don't have the audio. Yeah, it's okay.
Oh,
Perfectly.
oh, fine.
You can go ahead.
Fine. Okay. So let me share my screen. It will take a few seconds. And as Director Sir said, that today's topic is basically slightly a newer one for all the faculty members. Mostly you possibly are faculty members, and a few library professionals are also here. So for many of you, things will be slightly, slightly new domain. Basically, I tried to explore something new in the domain of open access resources, and we'll show you that how easy it is nowadays to tinker different open access resources and to support your research endeavor. So let's start the presentation, and someone please report me whether you can see the presentation or not. My screen. Screen is visible?
The screen is visible, yes.
Okay, fine, thank you. So the topic of the day is digital access brokers. The term is comparatively a new entry in the information services, and different kind of tools to explore open access resources. Nowadays, open access resources are omnipresent, possibly as a faculty member, as a researcher. Most of the cases in your education and research, you have utilized lot many open access resources knowingly or unknowingly. Okay, so now it is time to consolidate our efforts to utilize open access resources both in education and in research. So let me start from the this particular statement. So research can be defined in many ways. In different ways, research can be defined. So let me take this definition of research for the evening. That every research, whether it's a 10-page journal article or a 300-page doctoral dissertation or a student assignment, because I do hope some of the students are also here. So every kind of research starts with an existing piece of information and ends with a new piece of information, and most often this new piece of information available in documentary format. When you are publishing a research article, it is has got a documentary form, either in print format or in electronic format. So every research of any kind starts with an existing piece of information. Now, right from your day one in education to till date, how many types of resources you have encountered actually? Surprisingly, you have utilized an array of information resources, but most of these resources can be categorized into three different groups. One is the primary information sources, which gives you the first-hand research information or nascent microthought, what we call. Then the primary information resources are consolidated, repackaged in different kind of secondary information resources, like an abstracting journal, an indexing journal, from where you actually start searching. And then primary and secondary resources against particular disciplines are generally listed in tertiary sources, maybe in a directory, maybe in a database, maybe in a search engine, or a bibliography more traditionally, or bibliography of bibliographies. So tertiary gives you access to secondary, and secondary gives you access to primary. And information always flows from the primary to secondary to tertiary. But please remember, and most often we do commit a mistake here in searching information, that we directly jump inside primary information resources and we waste our valuable research time. The ideal way to search is basically to find out where are the tertiary sources in my domain, then to come to secondary sources, and from there to come to primary sources. So that is the ideal journey. I'm just trying to give you an example. For most of you people are associated with economics and business, and in the social science domain, economics, the domain of economics alone having 10,000 plus journals publishing all over the world in the domain of economics. So suppose you just quickly do a mathematics. Suppose these 10,000 journals are having on an average 1 volume per annum. Journal published 1 volume per annum on an average, and each volume contains number of issues depending on the frequency of the journal. For example, MDMI Business Review may be quarterly or monthly, so 12 issues per annum for monthly and 4 issues per annum for quarterly. So to keep our math simple, just think this 10 to the power 3 number of journals in economics having on an average 10 issues per annum, because there are weekly journals also, 54 issues per annum. So just keep math simple. 10 to the power 3 into 10 number of issues. So 10 to the power 4 number of issues. So each issue may contain different number of articles, 5, 6, 10, 15. So again, take 10 as an average. So at the end of the year, in the domain of economics alone, you are getting 10 to the power 5 number of articles, 1 lakhs of articles. So on a given topic, you are trying to search everything available for the last 10 years. So now it becomes 10 to the power 6 number of journals paper. And that 10 to the power 6 number of journal paper contains 20, 25 or 30 relevant papers against which you are basically searching. So if you are directly jumping to the primary journal, it is impossible to find out the most relevant resources in that manner. So there you need to find out what are the indexing, abstracting services, databases, secondary sources, tertiary sources available. From there you conduct a search, you get the reference, and then go to the primary source. So that should be the model. And that model is quite relevant both for the print domain as well as digital domain or electronic domain. Now in the next slide, you can see a more graphical approach to this particular primary, secondary and tertiary sources. So here, these are all primary sources which gives you the primary research information, first-hand research information, new information, novel information. So all are this type of sources: patent, conference proceeding, journal paper, trade literature, thesis. These are all consolidated into different secondary services: indexing, abstracting, reviews, reference book. In fact, most of the textbook are basically considered as a secondary source because they do not give you the primary information. These are basically work of compilation. They are giving you a systematic exposition on a given topic. So these are secondary sources, and these are again listed into different directories and lists like books in print, list of journal, international periodical directory like Aldrich International Periodical Directory, bibliography, data sets, databases. In fact, Google is basically a tertiary source. Google Scholar is a tertiary source. All the search engines, academic search engines you are using, they are nothing but tertiary sources. They index its secondary source like website, and website contains the primary document in the form of HTML, PDF, doc, and so on. So that is the model that we need to understand first as a researcher, as a faculty member. And then comes the approach. Why we people seek information? Why we people search information? So there are only 4 types of approaches that can be categorized. So on the one hand, we have 3 types of sources, and on the other, we have 4 types of information approach, and our requirement for research and education. So first one is the current approach. That means I am an expert in this particular domain. I am an established researcher and teacher, but I want to know what happened in my domain in the last 7 days, last 30 days, last 40 days or 6 months. So that kind of approach is called current approach. I want to keep myself abreast with the ongoing changes. I want to keep myself updated in my domain of research. So that is one approach. Second approach is called everyday approach. Before starting my job, before starting my work, I need to have a set of information even before starting my work. Say, you just imagine the example of life of a lab scientist, say chemist. The moment he or she is entering inside the lab, they need a set of information related to that particular chemical elements, what they are handling, different kind of vapor pressure, boiling point, and so on. Similarly, the life of a financial analyst. The moment he or she is entering the job or starting their job, they need to have a profile of stock market and different financial factors. So that is called everyday approach. I need this set of information to survive, to start my work. Next one is called exhaustive approach. I am a researcher. I am a beginner of a particular domain. I want to know everything available in that particular domain. I don't want to give any kind of filtering. So every time you are making a Google search or Google Scholar search without giving any kind of filtering, you are basically conducting an exhaustive search. And the last one is really interesting, and nowadays it is very much visible. That is called catching up approach. I am an expert in a given domain. I want to do some interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary research. I quickly need to catch the basic principle laws of other disciplines very quickly. And in that case, a journal paper, a book cannot give me the right kind of information. So there I need some specific kind of information which can quickly serve me the basic laws, principle, policies, and rules of that particular discipline. Say, for example, you are a student of economics and you want to very quickly pick up the skills of something on political science. So there, a book on political science, a journal on that particular topic is not going to serve you properly. So there you need a special kind of sources like trend report, reviews, so that you are getting a quick exposition what has happened in that particular research area and where it is going. Different kind of trend report, annual reviews, advances. These are basically serving the catching up approach. So this particular factor you please remember in mind when you will be going for different kind of discovery of digital information resources. We have 3 categories of sources and 4 categories of approaches. Okay. So after that, it comes till date, the 90% of research communication conducted through journals till date. In this age of a fast scholarly journal published in the year 1665. Peer review process started 10 years later, 1675. The first journal was Journal of the Scavens, published by Royal Society of Philosophy. But right from that 17th century to till date, we are following the same age-old model related to journal publication, even in this age of Netflix. The same subscription-based peer-reviewed journal system. So in that particular research domain, where as I said, that irrespective of the disciplines, 90% of the research still get carried through journals. So here in that particular case, you can see this is called information transfer cycle. You people conduct research, you write your manuscript, submit to the peer-reviewed journal, and reviewers are very tough people. They are our senior colleagues. They return your paper many times, you again correct it, and finally your paper published in a commercial high impact factor journal. But my question is that after your paper published in a reputed journal with impact factor and indexed in Scopus, Web of Science, etc. After that, what happened? Do you know? Have you ever thought what happened with your paper? You are again busy writing the next paper. So what happened to your paper? Your paper is actually located in different libraries of the world in the form of bound volume. This we call back volumes or bound volume of journal. Again, one fine morning, your junior researcher working in the same line what you have accomplished. So they pick up your paper, read it, mix it up with their own intuition and intelligence, write their own paper, and follow the same path. So it's basically becomes a information transfer cycle. We people, we academia are basically consumer of information as well as contributor of information. We perform both the role. We consume information, we mix with our intuition and intelligence and produce something new. And this is called a relay race kind of thing. Every generation gives the baton of research to the next generation of researcher. So information transfer cycle, you all know. What's new in it? Why I am repeating this particular point again? Because I am trying to create a background of open access. Then I will enter inside the core part of the deliberation. Then it's okay. We all know it because we conducted our research. We spent a good amount of time in researching, got our PhD, published a series of papers, and today we joined different faculty positions and holding different kind of academic responsibilities. So what is the problem? The problem actually started way back in 80s. So here, this particular graph you can see, let me try to maximize it. So in this particular graph, you can see one particular Harvard professor conducted this one, Professor Peter Subet. He is now a renowned open access enthusiast. So he conducted this particular study in covering all the economic factor from 80s, late 80s to early 2000. So here in this particular graph, you see during this point of time, 86 as a base year to 2002, consumer price index, this yellow dotted line, all over the world increased in the tune of plus 64%. Whereas government of US R&D expenditure increased in the tune of plus 120%. And journal price increased in this particular period plus 222%. Amazing. And interestingly, when it comes to journal, do you know this is the only industry in the world which do not pay a single paisa to procure raw materials? Rather, we fight with each other. We academia fight with each other to donate our intellectual property to them free of cost. So the entire raw materials they are gathering basically free of cost. Then who process the those raw materials for achieving quality? Our senior colleagues. They are acting as the reviewer. They are acting as a member of the editorial board, chief editor, section editor, associate editor. In fact, the entire quality control process is also free of cost. You are an associate editor of a reputed global journal, your prestige increases and you render your services free of cost. So we people render our or provide our intellectual property free of cost, our expertise to quality control that particular product again free of cost. But journal is charging exorbitantly. So we people are writing paper, our senior colleagues are editing it, but we do not have access because journal library budget is not increasing in the tune of plus 220%. Because the moment a financial crunch comes inside an institution, the fast wave goes to the library. So that happens all over the world globally. So this is true that journal library budget is not increasing at par with the journal price. Now, this is up to 2002. Then people started thinking, okay, the cost of printing is nowadays very high. So when everything will become digital, now journals are basically digital in nature and delivered at our laptop or desktop. We do not have to go to library to read a journal nowadays. So then the cost will be reduced because printing is not there. One particular digital copy can serve thousands of users simultaneously, but that never happened. You see here, another Harvard researcher conducted a study up to by taking factor up to 2010, from 86 to 2010. So where that particular person, the reference I have given below, shows that from 86 to 2010, this light blue line shows the CPI, Consumer Price Index, this one. It increased in the tune of 110%, whereas journal price increased in the tune of 400%. Remember, again, in case of digital journal also, they do not pay anything to the author for writing the paper. They do not pay anything for reviewing a paper, but still they are charging exorbitantly, and 400% increased during this period. And the latest data I have again from a very reputed organization, Association of Research Libraries. The entire North America is dominated by this particular group, very prominent and active group. They conducted the latest data, a survey with the latest data up to 2014. CPI increased in the tune of 118%. Total global expenditure increased in the tune of plus 197%. But journal price, you see, plus 521%. So not only it is the problematic situation for the faculty members, academia, researcher in India, it's a global phenomenon. Even government of US, the most affluent government of the world, they cannot keep pace with the exorbitant price rise of journal. So that is the situation. And who enjoys the profit? That is a very important thing. Believe it or not, this is the data from the Financial Times I have collected. It is up to 2014. The figure will be increasing very soon because the last 5 years data is ready, and possibly I will be sharing with you with the presentation. So if you take up to 2014, can you believe that entire scientific writing market, the way we people are producing journal paper, book chapters, conference proceeding, the business is basically 26.2 billion per annum. 26.2 billion is not a matter of joke. So we are burning our midnight oil and giving that particular product free of cost to the publisher, commercial publisher, and they are making huge business, and which actually goes up to 26.2 billion in the year 2014. And you just can imagine that what is happening in 2020. Definitely it actually reached to $40 billion or $42 billion. The data I will be presenting later. And this particular share, the lion's share is actually enjoys by the journal market, 6.8 billion. And this profit of that particular business directly goes to only 5 publishers in the world. Because you see, journal publishers are basically running a business scenario which is ideally an oligopoly. 5 or 6 major players are dominating the market. They tied their hand together and looting people. Why I'm saying so? Have you ever seen that Elsevier published a core journal in mathematics? Similarly, have you ever seen John Wiley is publishing a core journal in chemistry? No. They have divided the knowledge gamut amongst themselves. Science and technology, Elsevier. Math and stat, John Wiley. Biomedical literature, Chapman and Hall. Material science, Cluer. So they are basically dominating one particular area, and that's why I'm calling them academic mafia, because only mafias are doing this kind of thing. This is my area, this is your area, that is third party area. And when a new area comes up, something in knowledge domain, say for example when nanotechnology comes up, then again they have a fight in between. But Elsevier again, that's a lions, they are enjoying the lions here. They actually easily own the competition and capture the nanoscience technology. Similarly, the same case happened when bioinformatics came. So a number of examples I can cite, but I'm not going into this manner. So here you can see the entire profit, 16% of the entire profit goes to six Elsevier, followed by closely Springer Nature, followed by Blackwell, Taylor and Francis. Okay, so 5-6 major players are enjoying the actually the fruit of this particular free science writing. And I took pain to study this and downloaded all annual report of Elsevier. Elsevier is a subsidiary company. The parent company is called Reed Elsevier. So Reed Elsevier is a New York Stock Exchange listed, NSE listed company. Elsevier is working under it. So I downloaded only the Elsevier's annual report from the Reed Elsevier website, and from 2002 to 2011, you see constant 33 to 37% profit. You are all people from economics domain, management domain, business domain. Can you tell me on single business that is making 30% profit in this age of global recession? And do not forget that from 2002 onwards, the entire world actually going through the global recession time. So in this recession time also, they kept their profit margin intact, 33 to 37%. Nowadays, the oil companies are basically all over the world. The moment oil industry started, they are basically the most profit-making company. Do you have any idea what is the average profit of an oil company? 17 to 18%. And recession also touches them. But here you see, it's a recession-free business. Whatever may happen, if you need some journal from on science and technology or economics or business, you need to come to Elsevier. They are the monopolized organization. So similarly, the same thing is continuing. The last I conducted study up to 2019, it is also now reaches to 39%. And in this pandemic situation, I'm quite sure it actually reached 42 to 43%. And apart from Elsevier, same story continues with the Springer, 33%, John Wiley, 42% on an average, and academic divisions of Springer Nature, 32.4%. So please believe me that what we are donating, free of cost to them, they are making huge business out of it. And the most shocking information now I am going to share with you, because then onwards I will be entering inside my core area. As I said, that Reed Elsevier is the parent company. I am not, there is no animosity between myself and Elsevier. Elsevier is a multi-billion-dollar company. I am just taking Elsevier as an example here, so that you can have an idea that our field of academic endeavor is not as clean as we think. And we need to now give a second thought of all the whole publishing process, and we need to find out an alternative way to access information and knowledge. Now, as I said, that Reed Elsevier is an NSE listed company, and here you can see their profit, including many other organs, not only Elsevier. But this is really shocking. Elsevier's parent company, Reed Elsevier, has been criticized up to 2020 for their direct link to weapon industry. What they are doing with this huge amount of benefit and profit? Do you have any idea that Reed Elsevier conduct an arms trade fair in every year in the January in London? You just search, if you do not believe me, search Reed Elsevier London Arms Trade Fair. Every year in January, month of January, they conduct an arms trade fair openly. So now people started protesting that this is basically a bullet bandage economic policy. First, I will sell you bullet. You fight with each other, then I'll sell you bandage also. So this bullet bandage principle goes up to that level, that here you can see one particular journal from a very reputed publisher, BMJ Publishing House. So this is journal called Injury Prevention. So all the BMG publishing journals contains a disclaimer nowadays. Of all journals that should not be, now you see this particular second line. In light of recent revelations regarding the involvement of the giant publisher Reed Elsevier with the arms industry, we want to assure our readers and contributors that our publisher, the BMG Publishing Group, have no such links. Can you believe it? In an academic field, openly other journal publishers are giving disclaimer that we are not linked with arms industry, as the case with the Reed Elsevier. And this is happening. So the indirectly or directly, when I am writing a paper from Elsevier, it's basically I am indirectly helping in the arms industry. So they are, on the one hand, they are publishing a journal called Injury Prevention. On the other hand, they are contributing fund to landmines, which alone responsible for the 65% of physical injuries in the world. So this is the world we are living in the academic sector, because all of you are very matured participant here. That's why I am sharing this kind of thought, because we need to think in a different way. That is my point. And as a result, apart from these all kind of moral questions, as a result, what is happening practically? Practically, we are facing a serious crisis. We people are writing the paper, our colleagues are editing it, but we do not have access to the journals because our library cannot provide that. Our library cannot afford to subscribe all kind of journals. And as library budget is not increasing, what is happening? As a close person associated with the libraries, different libraries of India, I know they do not have any other option but to cut the number of titles. So every year they are rising their profit, their price, and every year libraries all over the world, including India, are decreasing the number of titles they subscribe. So this become a vicious cycle. Every year they are increasing, every year number of titles are dropping by the libraries. So who are suffering? Librarians? No, academia is suffering. If we do not have input, required input for development of our knowledge gamut, then how can we contribute to for the betterment of the society? How can we contribute for the betterment of the field of endeavor? No way. And this is actually happening in a situation is worse in developing countries like India. Again, there is a factor of consideration that government of India is paying twice for research. First, let me explain. First, they are funding me to do the research. For example, I got a fund from UGC or CSIR or DBT or ICAR, ICSSR. So the moment myself or my team of researchers got something good, we tend to publish our paper in a foreign journals. So again, my library is buying that particular journal. So government of India is paying twice. First, they are funding me to conduct the research. I publish my paper in a foreign journal. My library is subscribing it, and 95% of the libraries is again running on the top of government money, public money. So first they are funding their research, and their own research, they are buying again by paying foreign currency. So it's a double-edged payment system, and every time we are paying twice. So as a whole, in the summary, my backdrop creation is over. That research is publicly funded, your personal academic effort supported by the institution, but the moment we published our paper, we sign away the copyright to the publisher and give it free to the publisher. Publisher makes huge profit. I would like to draw your kind attention to the spelling of the term profit, because most of that particular publisher is of foreign origin. They are charging in terms of pounds and dollars. And as an author, what tangible return we are getting? Nothing. Our prestige increases, our career progresses, nothing more. So that is the backdrop on the top of which I would like to now discuss a new model which is called open access to knowledge. And what is this model? How this model is going to benefit us? What are the sources and tools that can help us to very quickly, get different sets of resources? So why open access? As a taxpayer, I pay, for the contribution of research, because as I said, that research is publicly funded. That means every citizen of the country is paying for conducting our research. But we always give copyright to the publisher. And copyright is neither author friendly, who writes the paper, nor reader friendly, who reads the paper. It's only publisher friendly. My own paper, if I want to, distribute amongst ourselves, those the participants present here, I need to take a written permission from my publisher, and then also they can give you the permission, they may not give you the permission. So that is the situation. My intellectual property is actually the property of a third party. And license is very complex and restrictive in nature. We are simpleton teachers. We do not read all the 8-point complex license agreements. We simply sign away. And as a result, what is happening, this is directly going to the libraries. Libraries are struggling to provide access to all required journals, because personally, how many journals we can subscribe? 1, 2, and that 1 and 2 journal will serve my purpose? No way. So I need to depend on libraries. And basically, this act of indifference by the academia is basically creating an indirect problem for libraries. Every year their budget, it is not possible to increase the budget of a library in 200% or 150%. And journal price, already that on an average it is going every per annum almost 80 to 120%, and in a 5-year block it goes to almost 500%. So first, traditional publishing houses, to oppose that one, commercialization of knowledge, all faculty members, all universities and research organizations came on a single platform under the leadership of ARL, Association of Research Libraries, those who conducted the last data. Now, they created a movement called SPARC, SPARC, Scholarly Publication and Resource Coalition. So that SPARC body actually conducted the first ever open access conference that is called Budapest Open Access Initiative. And there it says that free availability of research article or publication for any lawful purpose is the motto or objective of open knowledge movement. The only condition is that the right to be properly acknowledged. When you are using another person's paper, it is your duty and responsibility to cite that particular paper in proper format. So that is the objective of that was the objective of the first open access initiative. And from that point onwards, in fact, the entire open knowledge movement started from Los Alamos University by the physicist. They started the archive movement. All kind of physics paper, the preprint server they call it, all kind of the preprint versions of the paper they archive, and free of cost they distribute to the other physicists of the world. That become very popular amongst physicists. Soon it is quickly followed by other discipline, bioarchive, agri-archive, and so on. So that point of onwards, 1984 onwards, that movement started, got matured in the early 2000s. And now it is quite a matured domain, open access knowledge system, and people are guessing that by 2050, 100% of the objects will be available in open domain. But the problem is that these resources are distributed throughout the world, and there is no single consolidation of entire open access resources. So my point today is to show you what are the pathfinder services in open access, how from a single point of entry you can discover, you can retrieve lot many open access resources, not only for your research purpose but also for your education purpose. For example, last 2 years we are all trying to provide e-learning services. Now tell me, if in an e-learning system, when I provide the further reading list to the student, if that further reading list contains 60% or 70% of the material from commercial domain, books and journals, which students do not have access, is it possible to get success in e-learning? No. That's why Government of India, in their latest model of e-learning, that is called 4-quadrant model, they said purposefully that the third quadrant will be the knowledge listing, and that knowledge listing preferably should contain 70 to 80% resources from open access domain. And if as a researcher, as a teacher, I do not know from where I can find, how I can link from resources from open access domain, then it is very difficult to get success in e-learning. So it is not only related to your research, but also our education educational responsibilities of all the faculty members of the world. So entire open access can be divided into two groups. One is called a gold path, another is called a green path. So what is a gold path? When you people are directly publishing your paper in an open access journal, that is called gold path. When you publish your paper in a commercial journal, but one copy of that paper available in any of the open access repositories of the world, then it is called green path. And green path is slightly complex in nature. Again, let me explain you. Suppose I published a paper in an Elsevier journal. So I hold the nowadays, after Elsevier lost a case in federal court of US, now I have right to upload the preprint version of my paper or the postprint version of the paper. The exact published version is actually property of the publisher, but the preprint version is my property. Postprint version, I have changed something in abstract, something in conclusion, something in dataset, is my property. And I can upload that paper in any of the global access repositories, and that global access repositories will be indexed either by Google Scholar or by base academic search engine and other search engines I am going to show you. And there people can discover your paper. And I will also show you that how easy it is nowadays to upload and archive all of your paper in different open access repositories. So that is called green path. And now the question comes to your mind that is green path legal? I have given or signed away my entire copyright to the publisher. Again, I am as a presenter requesting you that you please donate your paper in green path, either the preprint or postprint version. But is it legal? I have given away the copyright to the publisher. Yes, it is completely legal. If you want to know more, then you can go to this particular project of open access that is called Sherpa Romeo, running by University of UK. The name of the committee is called JISC, Joint Information Support Committee. So this particular GISC group of UK higher education, they are running Sherpa Romeo project, and Sherpa Romeo project gives you the publisher's policy related to archiving. And similarly, Sherpa Juliet, another project, is giving you the views of the funding agencies. Suppose when I am writing a paper, there are three stakeholders. Myself as an author, my funding agency like CSIR, DBT, ISRO, and the publisher. So what is the view of publisher? My view is quite clear. I want to archive the paper. But as an author, I need to know what are the views of the other stakeholders, like publisher. Sherpa Romeo, I can get from for publisher, and Sherpa Juliet, I know the views of my funding agency. So it's a very essential service to know for an academia. And believe it or not, after they lost the coast in a federal case, now 38% of the total publisher are green publisher. Now, what is green publisher? Green publishers are those publishers who allow you to archive both preprint and postprint. Then comes 26% blue publisher. They allow you to archive only postprint. YOLO publisher can archive preprint and can archive preprint only. And white publisher, they allow nothing. It must be black, but I don't know why they have given a color code white. But this is the situation, and the number of green publishers are increasing every day. And this data, what I am showing you, 2018, but you can make a easy comparison now. Say, for example, I am going to Sherpa Romeo. So the moment I go to Sherpa Romeo, you can see I can search the publishing policy of a given journal or given publisher. So this is you just search by Sherpa Romeo. This is the site. So you can search by your name of your publisher, or you can directly search by your journal. through ISSN or title. Suppose you have published in journal X, you want to know what is the view of that particular journal. One publisher may publish thousands of journals, and thousands of journals may have different publishing policies. So it is always better to go by the journal. Just let me show you, say one of my favorite journal is Journal of Documentation. So I published a few papers there. I want to know the policy. So I am searching Journal of Documentation. Documentation. Okay. So if you type a few word, it will come. So I'm selecting Journal of Documentation. It is publishing. It is actually published by Emerald Insight. So the moment I select and click search, so it can tell me what is the publisher. So what I can do with the published version, what I can do with the expected version, what I can do with the submitted version. You see, here it shows you clearly that you can archive in institutional repository, in any non-commercial subject repository, or your institutional website. Published version, you can upload in your personal site. Accepted version, you can again go for different kind of institutional repository and so on, your own home page and so on. So that means it gives you a legal right. And here also it is saying that what should be the licensing agreement. This is called CC, stands for Creative Commons. I will be coming what is Creative Commons, because nowadays it is very important to know what is Creative Commons. The moment you want to archive something, you need to select a licensing agreement. So what kind of CC Creative Commons licensing agreements are there? What will be a little bit of protective? What is the most liberal one? Everything you need to know. So CC BY is the most liberal one. So every journal and everything you just nowadays you can see they are actually supporting open access after this movement actually become very matured. So again, I will come back to this one. Okay. So as I said that now we need to know the Creative Commons licensing agreement. So here there are 6 variants of Creative Commons you can see. In fact, there are many. Fundamentally, there are 4. Now, by combining all these 4 conditions, you can create any number of licensing agreements. So the most liberal one in CC0, you are giving every rights to the user. And the most restrictive is NCND. That means reading is always free. Distribution is always free. Redistribution is always there. But for non-commercial purpose, for non-derivative purpose. So here you can see, this is allowing you, the NCND, non-commercial, non-derivative, is allowing you to utilize the paper to distribute it, to redistribute it, to adapt it, but for non-commercial purposes and non-derivative. That means you cannot derive as it is any part of that particular paper in your study materials or in your book chapter and so on. So and this is quite liberal. You can utilize for anything. So depending or studying this one, my suggestion to all of you, when you are opening your material, always follow CC BY NCND, because that will support your faculty colleagues, to the researcher of your domain, to read it, to distribute it, to redistribute it, but it will restrict the commercial utilization or misappropriation of your intellectual property. But again, it depends on you. And what are the other benefits associated with open access? As I said first, before beginning, that we are both consumer and contributor. So as a contributor, what are my other benefits to support open access apart from the consuming? Because the moment I am supporting, I am also getting supported. I can access other faculty members' paper, which otherwise not possible in India through open access. But there is also a material benefit associated with it. It is actually, there is a very renowned bibliometrician, Steve Lawrence. He published a series of papers in Nature from 2001 onwards to 2010, where he actually demonstrated with data that if a particular journal paper available online, full text, free of cost, the chances of citation is getting higher. If you compare one paper available up to abstract level, you cannot read it. one paper in the same domain available with abstract as well as full text. You can read the full paper. So what paper you are going to cite? Definitely the second one. So he proved in different disciplines. Here I have given the graphs of computer science, from computer science. He has shown that there is an exponential increase in number of citations the moment you open up your paper. And the end of the day, my friend, how many papers we have written, it does not matter. It does matter how many citations we have received. So it is for our material benefit also that we need to open up our paper so that other people can read, they can cite. So that is one of the material benefit available with open access, apart from supporting a great philosophical cause. And how, as I said, that this is slightly complex to discover different kind of resources, and exorbitant number of resources available nowadays in open access. Almost 47% of entire resources now available as open access. By 2050, everything will be open access. But the problem is in organization. So here I tried to give you a systematic view that how you can approach towards the retrieval of open access resources. So you always start, you can start with Google and Google Scholar, because most of the cases we start here. But we often forget another very promising search engine in the domain created by Microsoft, that is called Bing, and that is powered by MAG, Microsoft Academic Graph. So it's a very powerful search engine, and most of the services I am going to show you, rather demonstrate before you, are basically based on MAG. But we often forget to utilize that particular very promising search engine of Microsoft Academic Graph, or otherwise it is called Bing. So as I said, apart from these two global search engines, we have number of open access resources, Pathfinder services. And as I said, that universities and knowledge institutes are basically performing a tremendous role in popularizing open access. So DOAJ, Directory of Open Access Journal, all the open access journal of the world you can have from DOAJ. It is actually started by Lund University. Then comes the open door. As I said, in the green path, you can upload in your open access repository. So how to find an open access repository? What are the open access repositories available in the domain of chemistry or economics? How to know? Open door is there, running by University of Nottingham. Then a similar service started by University of Southampton, which is called ROR, Registry of Open Access Repositories. Then there is OATD, Open Access Thesis and Dissertation. All European universities tied their hand together and created a common platform to uphold all kind of research showcase. So all kind of, nowadays there are different national repositories of thesis. We have Shodhganga, UK have Ethos, US have NDLTD, Australia has got Trove. So how it is possible for a researcher to move all the national thesis repositories to get a full text thesis? So here OATD is basically a single point access. Then comes DOAB, Directory of Open Access Book. OER Commons, UNESCO supported this OER Commons, where all educational resources will be available through a single window search interface. Then there are different kind of subject gateways. Say SSRN, many of you know, Social Science Research Network. Similarly, in Latin American countries, they have created Silo. All Latin American research will be available through Silo. Similarly, June has been created by the European University. So these are all first layer of services. Now, in this first layer of services are again consolidated into different tertiary sources. So as I said, the primary sources are actually contributed by the researcher. These are coming to the secondary sources like DOAJ, OpenDoor, ROR, and so on. And these are again tertiary sources: Base, academic search engine, Semantic Scholar, Dimension, Lens. So now let me show you that how easy nowadays it is to carry forward your search. Say this is doaj.org. Many of you must be knowing, presently having 16,507 journals I can search by journal title or by subject. I can search journal or full text. And how many papers? 62 lakhs of article available free of cost. And many of these particular journals are very, very renowned journal, like Public Library of Science, PLOS, all are DOAJ listed journal. And in India is doing quite well. You see, if I search in all fields, India is presently 300 plus journals listed in DOAJ, because government is directly supporting or promoting open access nowadays. So the moment I search by India, you see 394 index journals are there. But if you again, go by different kind of, this one like English only, then country of publication, domain of restriction, etc. So 390 plus, 90 plus journals are actually publishing from India. We are doing quite good in open access as a country. So this is the tertiary tools or meta tools in the domain of, as I said, tertiary tools are very important to know. So one of the example is DOAJ. Then you see how to know the green path. So there are two tools are there, opendoor.org, another is road registry of open access repositories, road.eprints.org. So this is Open Door, initially started by University of Nottingham, but presently it is maintained by the GISC group. As I said, GISC is the highest academic body in UK. Now suppose you want to know, as most of you people are from economics and commerce, so how many repositories are there in the domain of economics? How to know that? You click the advanced search here in Open Door. Select here, the subject domain. This subject listing is basically they have taken from Library of Congress. So here you can see science in general, social science, business and economics. You select it and click search. So all the repositories in the world will be listed here in alphabetical order. Similarly, the same thing you can conduct in ROR. Say, I want to know repositories from a given country utilizing a given software, holding theses or journal papers and so on. So ROR and DOOR, you can search the content also. So this is running by University of Southampton. So this is basically that these two are the tertiary tools of the green path. Similarly, there is a tertiary tools for the thesis and dissertation, oatd.org. So here you can search the entire thesis in full text from any universities of the world, including Sodh Ganga. So the moment they cover Sodh Ganga, all 1,000+ universities of India is automatically covered by it. And how many you are getting from this here? Free of cost. And this is the open access symbol created by UNESCO, and it is followed by everybody nowadays. So 58 lakhs. In fact, 5 crores 82 lakhs. So do not miss this particular resources, because they are trying to give you all kind of resources in a consolidated format. You do not have to move here and there. You come here and you will be getting everything. Then DOA book, as I said, doabooks.org. It's not as comprehensive as DOAJ, but still the every day it is actually increasing. So 622 publishers, all kind of monograph, textbook, and this will be very beneficial for your students. If you pass through this particular information to your students, that many of the textbook, the renowned textbook, global textbook, reputed textbooks are available free of cost from DOA's website, so they can access it. You can link with your e-learning system and so on. Okay, so then comes this. What I said, that the third level of this one, Bayes semantic scholar dimension. So a new generation of search engines are coming. So one is called Bayes-search.net, started by the Central Library of a German university, Bielefeld University. So by that name, it got the name Bielefeld Academic Search Engine. And how many resources are presently it covers? 273 million resources. And do not forget 1 million is equal to 10 lakhs. So 273 million resources are there, and it is counting. It is increasing every day. It is actually powered by Bielefeld University Library. And you see the search interface. Suppose if I search by say arsenic pollution. So, and you just mentally compare with your Google Scholar and Google Generic. So I can restrict my search directly in title, author, and subject. Not possible. It is possible in Google to restrict in title, but not by author and subject. Say I want in title. Then right from here, it can give me an option for different kind of filtering, language-wise filtering, document type-wise filtering, year-wise filtering, and so on. And right from here, I can get all kind of resources. I came to know which is open access, which is not. I can only retrieve only open access, the access, only open access. And most of the times, these unknowns are also open access. Now, any of this resource, the moment I click the full text of the hyperlink title, I don't have to know from where it is coming. It will serve me the full text of the paper. So Bayes is an excellent academic search engine. Most of the cases, we academia, we researchers simply are not aware of it, that it is available. And here you can see in a single window search interface, I can cover thesis, books, and everything. Because the moment you click advanced search, you can see here that how many types of documents are there: text, book chapter, journal, thesis, everything. I want only thesis. I uncheck everything, check only thesis. So it's a very sophisticated. I can go for the range search. I can go restrict my search in a given country or a given continent. A very sophisticated search engine powered by Apache Solar. Apache Solar, it's a open source text retrieval engine. So Bayes, it's an worth trying. Then, after Bayes, this is another new generation of search services are coming. One is called lens.org. And these are also quite good. Dimension and Semantic Scholar. So each of these search engines has got their unique advantage. Let me start with the lens. Say the same arsenic pollution I am searching here, and please remember whatever I am going to show you here, all are open access, all are free of cost. Right from your home you can have it, and the tools I am going to show you next will help you to keep yourself alert automatically what is happening in your domain. Say the same arsenic pollution, if I search, here you see it will give you all kind of bibliographic areas. So I have done a committed typing errors. So please be careful about it. You can see I have never restricted with this quote, single quote. So let me go to lens.org again. I am trying to conduct a page search here. Scholarly works, arsenic pollution. So now I have enclosed with the double inverted quote. Now the results will be coming. You can see here the result is typically the bibliographic domain. Here it can see that which is available as open access, which is not available as an open access. Everything it can give you. How many documents are there? 1086 number of paper came. Now, apart from this typical retrieval, you can see here there is a tab called analysis. So I can get an overview immediately that how my domain of research, that is arsenic pollution, from what point it started, who are the most prolific contributor, what are the most important research institute, everything it can analyze in a against a click. The moment I click analyze the result, you see what happens. The magic happens simply. And that is free of cost. Even commercial services do not give you this kind of information service support, like Scopus, Web of Science. They do not provide. Here you see the result or the magic. It tells you that analysis shows that these are the most important research in or most contributing institutes of the world. So your research actually started, sporadically in 80s and got a matured thing in 2000 onwards, and every year the publishing is increasing on arsenic pollution. Arsenic pollution is a multidisciplinary concept. People are working from environmental science, mostly chemistry, pollution control, environmental engineering, and so on. So you are getting groundwater closely associated, keyword cloud. So these are the institutes. These are the most active author on arsenic pollution, top 25. These are the citation pattern. And this is the global participation in the research. So the moment I click India, so 81. Moment I click China, 205. North America, and so on. So on a nutshell, I am getting an overview of the entire domain of research in which I am interested, top journals and so on, and free of cost. So not only the retrieval, it is trying to do an analysis for you, and that analysis is very important when you are doing your literature review. Similarly, in case of dimensions also, you can see if I copy the same arsenic pollution here. Here, the unique feature is that their retrieval interface is very sophisticated. Let me show you the same arsenic pollution I have searched here. Now I can sort these resources by citations, by altmetric attention score. Say which are the most cited paper here. So it can link me or sort by citation. Here, apart from that, it can give me the number of citations received by this paper and altmetric score. Altmetrics is nowadays very important. It is called article level metrics. Apart from your traditional citations network, how many of persons actually discussed your paper in different social networking tools like Twitter, Facebook, blog posting, Mentley, and so on. So it shows you that what are your altmetric score, whether it is open access or not. If open access, you click it here, you can get it. You can add the paper in your library so that later on the entire library you can download. And apart from that, it also gives you a little bit of analysis, not as comprehensive as LENS, but it is trying to show you that how your research domain is increasing from 2012 onwards, who are the researcher, what are the journal title. So a small scale analysis also available, but their beauty is this one, this comprehensive sorting and saving options alongside all kind of open access and PDF linking they are giving, for which these are available. Then Semantic Scholar is similar, but one thing is that here it is giving you a service called TLDR. Too long, don't read. They call this particular service by a funny name. They have a unique advantage of summarizing the entire paper in one informative sentence. So even you do not have to read the full abstract, 5, 6, 10 lines of abstract to know the key concept of the paper. They have developed a program. They're automatically summarizing this TLDR, and a very sophisticated one. So this is TLDR, and TLDR is basically based on a model called GPT-3. GPT-3, nowadays, writing by machine writing things. So here you can go through it, and here you can get an idea that how it is. Say for example, let me try to show you, because every paper has not TLDR. They started with computer science. So let me search with web scale discovery service. So I'm searching here. Here also you can see that different kind of filtering technique is there. Field of study, date range, those which are having their full text PTA, publication type, lot many filtering here. Sorting is there by citations and recency. But the beauty is here. Say this particular paper, selecting an appropriate web scale discovery service, a study of the big fours. I don't have to go to the full text access. This TLDR give me a one-liner of the entire paper. This is application of AI technology in summarizing. The paper attempts to explain in details the components of a typical WSD system and forcing WSD. So in one line, I am getting that what it is. If still I need the full, that thing you can see, and how they have summarized the abstract, that is also given there. So it is exactly this particular, TLDR is not part of the abstract. They have actually summarized by the application of different kind of AI technology. So this is one of the benefit that you can take. So these are the all the tools of new generation tools what I actually tried to mean here. But still, there are something more to know, and that is that these are all search engines. Then what do I mean by access brokers? So access brokers are basically a new generation tools that you can install inside your browser, because you can equip your browser, library access, unpaywall, Google Scholar, open access, citation C, co-cite, code discovery, then unpaywall, PubPeer, Scholar C, and so on. And the new kid in the town is Open Science Lens. So I have given the entire list that you can install. Let me show you that how does this work. So these are, you can see the moment, if you can see my browser here, you can see these are the icons. Every icon represents a digital access broker. So this is Scholarship, this is Wisdom, this is Open Access button, and so on. How to install that one? Very simple. Say for example, I want to install, say, Open Science Lens. So what to do? You just open a tab called Chrome Web Store. First you see how to install that, then I will show you this one, Chrome Web Store. So their entire list, I will be sharing with you this presentation. So you will be having the name of these resources. Then you search by this particular name, say Open Science Lens. So it will come. The moment Open Science Lens comes, so here you click it. I have already installed it, so it is showing me remove from Chrome. And if you do not have this particular tool, it will ask you that add to Chrome. The moment you click add to Chrome, it will come in this particular icon. If it is not coming after installation, then you click the last extension button here. It will list everything here, and then if it is something is not coming, you need to pin it. If you unpin, it will go from the icon list. If you pin it, it will come to the icon list. Now, what is the benefit? So benefit you can see, say for example, every time it is not possible to get everything from open access. Now you see what happens. So I came to a very well-known commercial tools called Science Direct or Emerald Insight and so on. So there also I am trying to search arsenic pollution. Now the moment I click this arsenic pollution, and suppose these are the papers available. So any of this paper when I open, this is already available in open access. You see something is happening in my browser. So here it says that full PDF is available. Here it is saying that it is available from the open access domain, GreenPath, and Here this S site, you can see it is showing me if a particular paper got references. References can be of two types. Some references, some citations is in support of the author views, some citation may be in the contradiction of the author views. So both it can give me. Unfortunately all are zero here, and this is called code discovery. So it says that code discovery it is available. This is unpayable. It is available in green path, the color will change, and so on. Now you see, let me show you that I have selected already a bronze path, that means already available from the publisher domain. Let me see this one. This is not available from Elsevier in full text. So what happens here? The moment I click this one, here you see all of my tools are basically trying to catch it up, whether it is available or not. So this says that it is available in white path. This is not available in document level. S site tells me it got two citations automatically, so that I can know the importance of the paper. And my core recommender is saying that, okay, this particular paper is not available, but I can give you a similar set of paper. This is my recommender. If I click this recommender, now you see it started finding all the related paper available from the open access. So I can have it. And if you still badly need this particular paper, no, I need this paper only. So okay, I need this paper only. So what happens? I have another tool called SciHub-X. So if everything fails, I can go for Guerrilla Open Access. So I call my SciHub-X. And I don't have to know that which SciHub is on, because there is always a hide and seek game. So it can programmatically call this one. It's a captcha code. And if everything is going well, if paper available, so I can get the full text. Sometimes it may take some time, but you can see it is actually trying to connect. So all of these digital access brokers are basically making my life very easy. Similarly, you see there this another paper. Let me show you the beauty of open access tools, S site and everything now. Say this one, anything, I'm just clicking blindly. So here you see, again my things have started running. S site is very consistent, always give me results. Let me show you the beauty of Open Science Lens. It's the newest one in the domain. Now I'm again trying to click another review article, which is not available as open access. Now here you just see this particular DOI. The moment you click that particular DOI, let me close this particular. The moment you are having getting this particular DOI, sometimes one of the disadvantages is that sometimes it may slow your browser, these lot many tools, but once you try that, you will be coming you will come to know that which are the tools serving you most well, so you keep those tools only. I have a huge number of tools, that's why it is creating some disturbance. So here you see, the moment you are getting this DOI, this particular lazy scholar is trying to get access every time. So that's why I cannot show you, but you just, this open access, open science lens is the moment it is actually getting any DOI, it can show you that whether that particular DOI, the full text available or not, right at that particular point. So you don't have to go anywhere, directly you can get it from here. So that is Open Science Lens, and this kind of digital access broker you can utilize. It will be working both for Science Direct as well as a lot many commercial tools, as well as different kind of open access domains. So you equipped your browser with the tools here what I shared. Most of the cases, again I'm saying, this unpaywall button is very interesting. Try to have it. Citation C, you can just get the APA or MLA citation pattern of that particular article. CoSites is a good one. Code Discovery provides good recommender services. Then Lazy Scholar is slightly slow, but it try to catch the citations and altmetrics, everything. So you may try. If you do not like, you can then remove it. Another one is the Open Access Helper, Open Access button, PubPeer, SciHubX, what I am using extensively, Scholarcy. Now I am coming to the Scholarcy. Scholarcy, you see, an excellent tool in one particular case. The only limitation is that it is available only in Google Chrome. Say, for example, let me go to Google Scholar. So if I search again by the arsenic pollution in Google Scholar, for using Scholarcy, Scholarcy is an excellent tool, but there are two conditions. You need to have your this one, it is available only in Google Chrome, and your file must be available from in PDF formatted, and it does not support ResearchGate. Except ResearchGate, it supports every PDF, because ResearchGate does not allow Scholarcy. So suppose this particular paper. So I have the PDF in full text. So open the PDF. So this is the PDF is opened. You can see it's a how many pages? 6 pages of paper. Now I do not have time, suppose, to read the entire 6 pages of paper and then take a decision whether this particular paper is relevant for me or not. So this includes a few references also, around 42 references. Okay, 1 to 42. So let me try to apply Scholarcy. So Scholarcy is a tool which can read on behalf of me, can summarize the paper into 6 magnets, and can tell me that which of these references are open access, which are not open access, what is the overview of that particular paper. So let me call my Scholarcy. The moment I call Scholarcy, it will take a few seconds. So it's started working, started reading on behalf of me. And finally, when the reading is over, it can give me the key concept and everything. Okay, so the reading is over, much less time it took. So these are the key concepts dealt by the paper. So suppose one particular concept I simply do not know. So what is selenium? So the moment I click, it will give me the background article on selenium available from Wikipedia. Then it can give me the abstract. So I'm not interested. I'm interested in Scholarcy highlight. You see the entire 6-page paper actually reduced into 6 points. So I can read these 6 points. So this is again an application of artificial intelligence in cryptographic universe. So I can read these 6 points and can take a decision that whether it is worth reading or not. And the killer application is these references. So I already told you there are 42 references. All 42 are synthesized. It can determine that which is available as open access, which not. And suppose this particular paper I find interesting, but I do not have time to open up or go through here. So what I can do, I can call my Scholarcy finding here. The moment I call Scholarcy finding here, right here, it can produce the description related to this paper. I don't have to go there. So here it can give me a brief details. So if I read it, again the 6-point summary, if I read and found it is interesting, then I can click that whether it's open access, you click the open access, you will get it. And at the same time, I can know everything from semantic citation, how many citation it has received. So it has received 344 mentions and 14 supporting citations. So you see the entire thing is in your fingerprint, and these tools are available free of cost. How to install a site? Go to your Chrome Web Store, search by scholarship, click it, add to Chrome, and it can save 10,000, 20,000 hours in your research time. Okay. So I am almost at the end of my domain, but let me show you another interesting things happening here. Say for example, I have started at a particular research project. Suppose the moment you start writing a paper or start exploring something, you first collect a handful of core paper. So suppose here I am searching the application of serendipity in information discovery, a quite new domain of my area, but you replace my area with your area of interest, the process will be the same. Say I created here a collection in Zotero, MDIM. I collected a 5 core papers in my area. These are all highly cited core papers, quite matching with my research. So what I will do to explore that what other papers, and I can tell you there are tools within 5 minutes you can discover all the related paper in your research domain. Otherwise it may take 3 months, 4 months of time to discover every related paper in your domain. Sometimes it is very difficult, but here I am going to show you 2 tools. The moment you discover 5, it requires only 5 core papers. You just identify 5 core papers, add it into your reference manager software like Zotero or Mendeley or whatever you are using, EndNote. Then from there, that 5 paper you export in BibTeX format. So export the entire collection in BibTeX format. So here I am exporting in this particular one, that MDIM2.bib. Now it is saved. Your Zotero purpose is over. You have collected 5 core papers in your research. Now you are going to discover through an access booker that what are the other related tools. You give me automatically. I don't have time. So this is, there are 2 tools available. First, let me show you the easy one, Insightful, insightful.xyz. So this is basically again AI-based technology which gives you the citation network and all the papers you have missed and your core papers for literature review purposes or for idea generation purposes that you are not going to miss anymore. So I can start searching from here, but my suggestion is that in that way it never works in a better way. So you click the import BibTeX file, and all your these 5 plus 6 core papers is required. I have 7 there, possibly 1, 2, almost 7 papers I am having. Minimum 5 is required. So go. The moment you import this here, you see the magic again. So all the 7 papers you have included, you will be coming. These are the 7 papers. Again, you can remove something or you can add anything. So I'm not removing or adding anything. These are the 7 papers I have given as the input. Now this tool, you see what it is doing for me. It tells me that these are the papers you are missing. These are the 7 papers. On the basis of that, it created a citation network for me. And you can see the papers which are in slightly different color. All are blue. Some are deep blue. Some are royal blue. So all this royal blue paper in bigger form. The bigger bubbles are more important paper for you. Now suppose I do not have the paper from Cropley, from Foster, from Rubin, from Third. So all this important paper, and you can see here which one is the most important node. So this paper is mostly linked with many papers. So Cleverley. So these are the paper, MacCape. So I want to add. So the moment I click it, it shows me this is the paper, this is the abstract, this is the number of citations. Would you like to add to literature review? Yes. Then add this paper. So I started with 7, now it become 8. You see, view all linked papers. So in this way, you can see this one added. Then again, you can open up your graph. You can add this one after reading. So I'm doing here mechanically because of the time, but you understand that what to do. You need to read the abstract, check the citation, and here directly it is saying whether open access or not. Add to literature review, then add paper. So now it becomes 9. So when it becomes 9 in this way, it may become, more than 9 and so on. Then you can again download this BibTeX file and you can upload in Zotero. So you started with 5-6 papers. Now all the network you can discover, you can explore, and you can bring back to your Zotero. Apart from this, literature map network, you can also tell you the suggestion that you may add this paper. So you can click plus, it will be, paper will be added. So in this way also you can add. And it is also showing you what are the most important paper in this citation network. So that is the suggestion from the graph. You may or may not agree, but from here also you can select a few papers. These are the most important papers automatically generated from the graph. So that is the suggestion basically that you can add. So my point is that you have started with 5-6 and you are reaching 50-60 very quickly. Then again download this BibTeX paper and add to your Zotero. You are having almost all relevant papers in your domain of research within 5-10 minutes. Otherwise, you are all mature researcher. You think it may take 3 months or 4 months of time to identify every paper in your domain. So another similar service is apart from impactful is app.litmaps.co. Litmaps is doing this thing in the same way and slightly more complex. So Insightful is the very beginner's tool. You start with Insightful, then gradually come to Litmaps. So Litmap work in the same way. You can sign in, and always you can register free of cost. You can sign in with ORCID, and the moment you sign in, you can save your project, you can set alerts. So automatically Litmap will create your the entire literature map silently over the time. So that facility is not available with this Insightful. It is slightly complex, but once you know it, they have a beautiful video tutorial on Litmaps. And this beauty thing, another beauty is that completely free of cost. So I create many maps with this one. So the moment you want to create a new map, you can import just like your BibTeX or DOI. The similar way what you have seen. The same bibliography I am uploading here, and you see here. So all the article you have uploaded, and it is now creating the map. You see how comprehensive is this one. And again also you can select different kind of visualization. You can select which are the papers you want to include inside map. Then it can create map for you, and at the end of the day you can create different kind of you can download this particular map in image format. You can run your in auto alerting service and many more. But one condition is that suppose this 5 paper I am adding to map. So in this way, these two tools are very interesting. Litmaps will take time. Within 2-3 minutes, you cannot understand the complexity. You try with 2-3 papers, And then you will understand how it works and how beneficial it is and how you can utilize for your literature. And at the last part, let me show you that one automated systematic review. See here, I am closing this one. Let me go out. This particular tool for those who are slightly exploring their computer, be it Windows, be it Linux, does not matter. Don't think that I'm showing everything is for Linux only, because these are all browser based. Any platform can serve, but the tool what I am going to show you can serve you both in Windows as well as in Linux. So you only need Python, and this tool is called automated systematic review. What does it do? It does simply magic for us. So this is the tool ASR Review, completely machine learning based tools to support your research endeavor. The moment you click installation part, you can see it can give you a direct thing that how to install in Windows. The only requirement is that you need to have Python 3 in Windows, how to install Python 3, how to install AS Review. Everything is very, only 2-3 commands are there. You can have it. The moment your server is on, suppose I am running this ASS server, I am using this one extensively. I'm running this server in my another laptop. So let me go there. Okay. So I'm trying to connect my another laptop through SSH. So there I am starting my server, AS Review server. So that means what I am trying to show you here, it is LAN compatible as well as desktop compatible. You can run in your desktop or in any machine of your LAN. So I've started my AS Review. So the demo started. Now I need to contact the other machine with the IP address. So 192.168.253.77 : I am running on port 5555. So this is the AS Review started in my local machine. And you see what it can do for me. Now I have collected from Scopus database a set of, you can see in CSV format, any particular commercial database or open source data, open access databases what we have discussed so far can give you data, and you can download your data in CSV formatted. Most of the cases it shows. So this is the CSV file, and this CSV file contains around you can see here 1878 number of papers, 1897 possibly, 1897 number of papers, and it's directly downloaded from Scopus. Author is there, then title is there, abstract is there. Abstract is a must because it is actually the purpose of the tool is that I am now feeding it to 2000 abstract. I will train the model by selecting 5-10 papers, and now it can rank the abstract, that what I should study, what are the top 100 abstract according to my requirement. Otherwise I need to go through all 2000 and then select which 50, which 100 is required for me. That can be done through a access broker. So here you can see this is the abstract and so on. So it's anything, anywhere you can get this particular file from open access database or from commercial database. I collected from Scopus. Now I'm starting a project, new project. So I'm giving author names, MDIM. So this is a test. Now next. In the next, it will tell me that you either drag and drop the file or upload the file. So click here. So this is the data set MDIM. So this is the data BIP data, which contains 1897 number of papers. Upload. So all around 2000 abstract, I fed here, and here you can see it says that you have given me 1897 number of publications. Then the moment I click next, it will tell me that what is your focus. Now this paper set what based on a real research we are conducting, that the homophobia in Indian libraries. How in Indian libraries we are treating LGBTQIA people. What are these collection strains? What is the view? So library is one of the focus of this paper. So library services for LGBTQI people. So I'm searching by library. So how many papers are there? My focus is library. So it can now tell me that these are the paper I found related to library, the most relevant paper from the data set 1897. You now select which is most relevant for you. So suppose the first one is relevant, library services. So in this way, I'm selecting at least 5. You can go for more than 5, but at least 5. Okay. So in this document I have selected and click return. Okay, it is almost 5 is over. Now again it is giving me a chance. These are the paper you have selected. You again got a chance to delete it or include other things. Okay, so click next. Now it is asking me that you have selected 5. On the basis of your first level input, I am giving you these are the relevant data for you. You just mark which is relevant, which is not relevant. So this one is irrelevant. Now this is librarianship relevant, and this is also relevant, LGBTQ college library services. Now the moment this input is over, you can see that irrelevant. So all these suggestions I have completed. Then next. Then I need to select which model you are going to use. 4 models it is supporting. The most popular model you all know, NAB-based model. So I'm selecting, this is selected by default. Now start reviewing. Now computer is doing reviewing on behalf of me. I have randomly selected 5 and another 5. So around 11 paper, 10, 11 papers. Now you see, I can now have the result, export the result. In Excel or CSV, say CSV, export, save file. So this is the AS review result. Download it, you go to your folder, now result came, and you see what it does for me. All 2000 abstract, it ranked according to my requirement. So this is the last column. If I go, here you can see the last column added, that these are the actually included in review, and this is the rank of 2000 paper. So I can go for the top 50 or top 100 or top 500. So this one. So 2000 paper as a system which can be installed very easily, saved again another 3-4 months of my time. So that's all from my end. Thank you very much for your patience sharing. Okay, so let me stop sharing.
Sir, Jogan sir. Hello.
Bolo.
Sir, there are few questions from the participant.
That Q&A, question and answer.
Yes. Shall I read, sir?
Oh, please. That would be better.
Okay, sir. One question, Dr. Madhusri Ghosh Upadhyay. What are the open open access resources in Bengali literature or languages?
The best one is you can go for the Internet Archive, archive.org. It includes even the first edition of Kopal Kondola. So rich amount of rare documents, outdated document in Indian regional language you can have from archive.org. And popularly we call it Internet Archive.
Yes, sir. The next one is SJ Jain. Sir, does
Hmm.
all the open source access resources which you have mentioned indexes in OAI STER? STER.
Yes. OSTAR is basically a OAI PMH service provider. OAI Star at one point of time it was a huge service. Nowadays it is not so. It is actually declining, and most of the cases the tools what I mentioned, Base, Semantic Scholar, these are much more advanced in compare with the OAI Star, and OAI Star they are not maintaining nowadays properly. So it is time to say goodbye to OAI Star and come in these new tools.
Okay. So next question is from Pratap Chandra Roy. UGC Infonet journals are available in the university campus only. How
Hmm.
researchers get these journals from their residents at this pandemic situation?
Oh, if you are talking about technology, then that technology in our university we have adapted, that is called a kind of name resolution service, we call it, that is called RemoteX. So that RemoteX service we are utilizing. But possibly you have not asked this question. Your question is that what is the alternative to access these resources which my library is presently not supporting me. So that's why the tools I have mentioned here. So Base, these dimensions, then different kind of other search engines, your different kind of tools that can now help you to get free full text access to different resources.
Yes, sir. So next, last one, Mike Nail Eco. That's his question is there any significant difference between OER and OAR?
Yes, there is a very good question actually. There is lot of differences. OAR stands for Open Access Repositories. These are basically meant for research materials in the form of journal articles, in the form of full text theses, and so on. On the other hand, OER stands for Open Educational Resources. These are basically presentation, classroom videos, and many more. So one is the focus is education for OER, and for OAR the focus is research. And in the higher education, these two are actually complementary and supplementary to each other. Many OER includes research articles. Similarly, many OAR also includes different kind of educational materials. But at the up to UG level, these two are distinct. One is for education, one is for research.
Yes, sir. And sir, last question from Rupinder Singh. Does this open resources support LTI so I can link the integration them in my LMS?
Yes. LTI stands for Learning Tools Interoperability. So you can see many OER repositories, gateways are there. Marlot is there. Then entire European countries there is another one. The name I forgot presently. So these are all LTI integrated. That means immediately you can insert that inside your document. Let me show you that one example. Let me open up so that I can show you one example. That's again a very interesting question. LTI I am studying a lot nowadays, and it has got many unique advantages. Say, second, I'm trying to share something. Okay. Can you see the screen now?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, here you see who have asked me about the LTI compatibility. You see these are all LTI compatible services. Some are the non-LTI compatible services also. Here I am using an LMS called Moodle. So here we converted Koha into our LTI services. Any services can be exported into LTI, can be linked with the Moodle. Say for example, base search I told you. Now right from my student can search, say for example,
Hello. Hello.
Yeah, I think we have lost Professor
Um,
Partha Sharma.
sir, yes.
okay, are you getting my voice?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Hello?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, yeah,
Yes. Yes.
now, yes.
Okay. Oh, unfortunately, I muted that one. So what I mean that you can search nowadays your library catalog, your all kind of search engines inside your LMS through LTI. Say for example, in Koha, I want to search title Gandhi. So now it will conduct my local Koha and try to retrieve all the book with the title Gandhi. So these are
Sir,
all
screen is
LTI.
not visible.
Okay, these are all LTI. That means for a second we have lost connection actually. Now it is visible.
Yes, sir.
Now it
Yes, sir.
is visible, sir. Yeah.
Okay. So here you can see my Koha says that nothing related with this one. So in there, this is LTI, but LTI version model version 3.8 onwards, it is LTI compatible. Any of your local service you can convert into your LTI. Many global services are there that you can include inside your system, like WorldCat and so on. Got it?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes.
Any other question, Jogan?
Sir, there are. Mm,
Okay then. So let's call
yes,
it
sir.
a day. Or
Yes,
call
yes,
it a night rather.
sir.
Quality night. Yes, sir. So nice, very informative session as usual from your side, sir. So we are really thankful to you.
Okay.
So it's really enlightening 2 hours. So it's always a pleasure listening to you. Now, at the end of we have come to the end of the workshop, and I'll propose the vote of thanks.
Okay.
I would like to thank our resource person, Professor Partha Sarathi Mukhopadhyay, for this wonderful session. Uh, we would like to thank Dr. Professor Atmanand sir, Director MDI Murshidabad, Mr. Jogen Sharma, coordinator of this workshop, Mr. Devashish Gupta, Registrar MDI Murshidabad, IT team of MDIM, that is Mr. Avirup and Mr. Taposh, for smooth delivery of this workshop. We thank all respected faculty and non-faculty members, as well as students of MDIM family. I would like to thank all the participants from all across the country as well as abroad, without whose active participation, the workshop would not have been a success. Thank you all and good night. And just to add, the feedback link, many of you were asking for feedback. Link will be sent to you post this workshop. It will be sent to you. So thank you all and have a wonderful evening ahead. Thank you.
Okay. Good night.
Bye.
Good night. Thank you.
Good
Thank
night,
you.
sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Professor Parthasarathi Mukhopadhyay.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jogen. Thank you, Dr.
Thank you,
Shah.
sir. Thank you, sir. Good night.
Thank you, sir. Good night.
Good night.
স্যার তাহলে ক্লোজ করে দিই।
ঠিক আছে, ওকে যোগেন্দা, গুড নাইট।
ওকে, গুড নাইট, থ্যাংক ইউ।